Hi there, and welcome to the MDN Curriculum Review. I'm Shant Dashjian, and in this series of videos, we will go on a journey to review the entire MDN curriculum for front-end developers. In each video, we will spend the time looking at all the skills and the knowledge in one module and all the learning resources recommended by MDN to learn those skills and gain that knowledge. Along the way, I will be sharing some of my own thoughts and insights based on my years of experience in the industry. In this first video in the series, we will introduce the series and have an overview of the curriculum. We will look at the website for the MDN curriculum and what's in the About page. And by the end of this video, you will have answers to three main questions. First, what is the MDN curriculum? Second, why was it created? And third, what does it cover? I have great passion about programming and teaching, and it gives me great joy to share that passion with you in this series of videos. So without further ado, let's get started. We will use this mind map to go through all the concepts, but first, let's take a look at the MDN website. MDN, if you didn't know, stands for the Mozilla Developer Network. This website has been the authoritative go-to documentation site for all web technologies, including CSS, HTML, and JavaScript since 2005. Let's go to the curriculum page. Here we have a welcoming section, a section to tell us about the curriculum, and at the bottom we have the actual modules that constitute the curriculum. Those are divided into three sections. There is the Getting Started section, which has 2 modules, the Core section, which is the main section. This one has 9 modules, and the last section, the Extensions, also has 9 modules of the curriculum. Let's go back to our mind map here and go through what's in the About page. The first question we want to answer is, what is the MDN curriculum? The MDN curriculum is both a guide and the recommended learning resources to teach us what that guide is about. That guide is a guide to the fundamental skills and knowledge for being a successful front-end developer. The goal here is to help you as a developer to have long-term employability in the web industry. MDN recommends using Scrimba, which is a very popular interactive learning platform, to learn all those skills and gain that knowledge. MDN recommends going through the front-end developer career path on Scrimba because it covers all the learning outcomes of the MDN curriculum core. Let's take a look at the front-end developer career path on scrimba.com. Here we see it has 13 modules that take you from no knowledge and skills all the way to getting hired, meaning you will have the skills and knowledge to be hireable as a junior front-end developer in the industry. Now that we know what the MDN curriculum is, let's look at the motivation. MDN explains that it has been getting great feedback from the industry and the hiring managers in the industry about a lack of certain skills and knowledge. They see that there are great gaps in new hires. Here are what they are seeing. First, they see that there is so much focus on using frameworks like React, Angular, and Vue, combined with a lack of understanding of the underlying technologies behind those frameworks. We see that today. There is great focus on learning React and using React in the industry. Back in 2016, I remember Angular.js being the framework to learn to use in front-end development. So frameworks come and go. One framework becomes more popular than the other at a certain time. But what the MDN curriculum is focusing on is having the core technologies here. Because when you focus on the frameworks, what you'll have is a lack of problem-solving skills and less long-term employability as tools and frameworks change. In addition to that focus on the frameworks, there is a lack of core best practices. Semantics, accessibility, and responsive design are the top 3 here. What does this lead to? It leads to a lack of user focus, leading to usability limitations in the websites and solutions created. There are also gaps in the knowledge of how browsers work, how they surface information, and the interactivity you get in the browser for free. What does this lead to? It leads to solutions that are overcomplicated and often inaccessible. The fourth problem is the limited problem solving and soft skills we see in new hires. So the MDN curriculum was created to address those gaps. There is also emphasis on the values that the web should have. What are those values? Accessibility, sustainability, usability, performance, and community. Let's take a look at sustainability, for example. Here we have the Sustainable Web Manifesto. It is primarily the idea that the web should be good for the environment. Here are the values that we want to see in our web to make it sustainable. First, we want it to be clean. We want it to be efficient, meaning use technologies that use the least amount of energy and material resources possible. We also want the web to be open. We want it to be honest. We want it to be regenerative. And lastly, we want it to be resilient. What is the target audience for the MDN curriculum? It targets both students and educators. And there are three kinds of students who would benefit from going through the MDN curriculum. First, students who want to become web developers. There are also existing web developers who want to level up their skills and fill any gaps they have in their knowledge and skills. Lastly, we have web developers who are not focused on the front end, but want to gain the knowledge and the skills on the front end. So those are the non-front end web developers. And for educators, MDN has the promise to keep the curriculum up to date by reviewing it annually to ensure that it's up to date. Again, for the educators, MDN recommends that they use Scrimba and its interactive front-end developer career path because it covers all the learning outcomes of the MDN curriculum core. Let's look at the scope. What does the MDN curriculum cover? First, let's look at what it covers. So what's covered in the MDN curriculum? The most important part that's covered in the MDN curriculum are the core technical skills: semantic HTML, CSS, JavaScript fundamentals. Also covered are best practices, things like accessibility, responsive design, and UI design theory. Key tools are also covered, like frameworks like React, and also version control like Git. Also covered are soft skills. Those are the ones required to secure a job in the industry today. There's also good coverage of environment knowledge, things like computers and file systems, browsing the web, command line basics, and code editors. The MDN curriculum also covers things like CSS transforms and animation, web APIs, performance, security and privacy, and testing. What is the level of detail of the coverage? As far as the web fundamentals, things like CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, those will be covered in depth. Other skills and knowledge, like version control and testing, are also covered, but more superficially. Now, let's look at what's not covered in the MDN curriculum for front-end developers. As you could imagine, back-end languages and platforms are not covered in this curriculum. One exception is made here for Node.js because it is so versatile in the industry that a certain level of basic knowledge is necessary for front-end developers. Also not covered are databases, whether they were relational or non-relational databases. Again, the exception here is anything on the front end like web storage and cookies. Also not covered are DevOps technologies, things like cloud technologies, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. Also not covered are containers and orchestration like Kubernetes and Docker. Advanced graphic design is not covered. and skills for product and program management. As far as attribution, the content of the MDN curriculum is completely free to use, but MDN requests that you consider linking to it and telling others about it, like we are doing here in this series of videos. Curriculum update process. As we mentioned earlier, it will be reviewed and updated annually, specifically in Q2. This will give time for educators to update their own curriculum for their students accordingly. Lastly, as far as feedback, you are encouraged to provide feedback for the MDN curriculum, and you can provide it in the source code repo. Let's take a look here. We are on github.com. We are in the MDN/curriculum. To provide feedback, you can go to issues, add an issue here to the list of issues. This concludes this video in which we learned about the MDN curriculum, what was the motivation behind creating it, and what is covered in the curriculum. For the next video, we will start with the first module in the curriculum, and that is the soft skills. Until then, be well.